Every day, millions of people wake up believing they're living on purpose. But according to Napoleon Hill, they are drifting. This is arguably the book's central idea and deserves its own video. Why most people never realize they're giving their lives away. This won't be another book summary. It will feel like an investigation. The central question becomes, how do people lose control of their lives without ever realizing it? That is a terrifying question. Imagine waking up at 65 years old, only to discover you were never really living. Not because someone imprisoned you, not because someone stole your dreams, but because, day after day, you slowly drifted away from them. The frightening part, you never noticed it happening. You weren't making one terrible decision. You were making thousands of comfortable ones, one ordinary morning at a time. Napoleon Hill called this drifting. And according to one of the most controversial conversations ever written, drifting is exactly how millions of intelligent people surrender their lives without ever knowing it. What is drifting? How does it happen? Why doesn't it feel dangerous? Can I be drifting too? How do I escape? Why most people never realize they're giving their lives away. Now, let's begin the hidden psychology of drifting, inspired by Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. You wake up tomorrow morning, and everything looks exactly the same. Your alarm rings. You make your coffee. You check your phone. You answer a few messages. You go to work. You come home. You watch something to relax. Then you go to bed, telling yourself you'll start living tomorrow. Nothing about that day feels dangerous. In fact, it feels completely normal. And that's exactly what should terrify you. Because according to one of the most controversial books ever written, people rarely lose their lives through one catastrophic mistake. They lose them through thousands of ordinary days that all look the same. Napoleon Hill called this drifting. Not failure, not laziness, not weakness. Drifting, a psychological state where you slowly surrender your life without ever realizing you're doing it. Here's the unsettling part. Drifting doesn't feel like giving up. It feels like being busy. It feels like staying comfortable. It feels like doing what everyone else is doing. Which means millions of people never notice they are drifting. Because drifting looks exactly like normal life. Think about that. Nobody wakes up and decides, today, I'll abandon my dreams. Nobody says, I'm going to waste the next 20 years. It doesn't happen like that. Instead, they postpone one difficult conversation, delay one important decision, ignore one quiet dream, choose comfort over courage, just one more time, and then another, and another, until one day, they look back and wonder where their life went. But here's the question that changes everything. What if drifting isn't an accident? What if it's a psychological trap that the human mind naturally falls into? What if the greatest battle you'll ever fight isn't against failure, or bad luck, or even fear? What if it's against unconscious living? Because the most dangerous prison in the world isn't made of concrete. It isn't surrounded by barbed wire. It has no guards, no locked doors, no visible walls. It's built from routines, habits, assumptions, and stories you've repeated so many times. They've started feeling like truth. You wake up inside it every morning, and unless something interrupts the pattern, You'll go to sleep inside it every night. The frightening part, you won't even know you're there. Because drifting never announces itself. It doesn't arrive wearing a villain's mask. It arrives dressed as common sense. I'll start next month. I'm too busy right now. Things will calm down eventually. I just need a little more time. Reasonable thoughts. Harmless thoughts. Until you realize they've been quietly directing your life for years. So before we go any further, I want you to ask yourself one uncomfortable question. Not whether you're successful. Not whether you're happy. Not even whether you're productive. Ask yourself this. Who is actually making the decisions in your life? Is it you? Or is it the version of you that has learned to choose what feels familiar instead of what creates growth? Because if Napoleon Hill was right, then drifting isn't something that happens to a few unlucky people. It's something every human being must consciously resist. And by the end of this documentary, you may never look at your daily routine the same way again. The invisible current. Have you ever stood beside a river so calm that it almost looked still? No crashing waves, no violent rapids, just a gentle current, moving so quietly, you barely notice it's there. Now imagine stepping into that river. At first, nothing seems to happen. You're standing exactly where you intended to stand. The water barely reaches your ankles. You feel completely in control. A minute passes. Still nothing. 5 minutes. Everything feels the same. But then you look toward the shore. And suddenly, it's farther away than you remember. You didn't swim. You didn't walk. You didn't even feel yourself moving. Yet somehow, the current carried you downstream. Drifting works exactly like that. It doesn't force you to abandon your dreams. It simply carries you, one unnoticed decision at a time. That's why it's so difficult to recognize. We're trained to notice dramatic change. A business collapsing. A relationship ending. A health scare. A financial crisis. Those moments demand our attention. But drifting is different. It happens in silence. No alarms. No warnings. No obvious signs. Only tiny decisions that feel too insignificant to matter. Sleeping through the alarm, again. Putting off the difficult conversation, again. Choosing entertainment instead of creation, again. Telling yourself, I'll start when life settles down, again. Each decision feels harmless, almost invisible. But together, they begin steering your life in a completely different direction. Here's the strange part. If someone asked you what you did yesterday, you could probably answer. If they asked about last week, you'd remember some of it. But what about 3 years ago? 5 years ago, 10? Most people struggle to recall. Not because nothing happened, but because routine has a way of blending thousands of ordinary days into one indistinguishable memory. Psychologists sometimes describe this as living on autopilot. Your brain loves efficiency. It builds habits so you don't have to consciously think about every action. That's a remarkable survival mechanism. Imagine having to relearn how to tie your shoes every morning, or think through every step of brushing your teeth. Habits free your mind for more important decisions. But there's a hidden danger. The same brain that automates useful behaviors also automates beliefs, reactions, excuses, emotional patterns. Eventually, you stop choosing them You simply repeat them. And repetition has a strange effect. Anything repeated often enough begins to feel true. Consider this. A child hears, "People like us don't become successful." At first, it's just a sentence. Years later, it becomes an identity. Someone experiences one painful rejection. Eventually, they begin believing, "I'm just not the kind of person people choose." Another fails at a business. Years later, they quietly introduce themselves to the world as someone who isn't entrepreneurial. The event lasted days. The story lasted decades. This is how drifting becomes invisible. Not because people stop thinking, but because they stop questioning. They confuse familiarity with truth. Napoleon Hill believed that was one of the greatest psychological traps a person could fall into. Not ignorance, not lack of intelligence, unquestioned thinking. Think about your own life. How many routines have you inherited? Without ever deciding if they belong to you, wake up. Check your phone, scroll, compare, rush, work, recover, repeat. Who designed that rhythm? Did you? Or did you simply inherit it? One day at a time. Most people believe they are making choices. But what if many of those choices were made years ago? What if today's decisions are simply echoes of yesterday's habits? That idea is uncomfortable because it means the greatest influence over your future may not be one dramatic decision. It may be the ordinary morning you never stop to question. And that's exactly how the current keeps moving. Not by pulling harder, but by convincing you you're standing still. Transition, but drifting doesn't happen because people are lazy. In fact, some of the busiest people in the world are drifting the fastest, which raises an even more disturbing question. If hard work isn't enough, why do intelligent, ambitious people still wake up years later feeling like strangers in their own lives? The answer has almost nothing to do with effort, and everything to do with the psychology of attention. This is describing my life. The modern drift, the world that profits from your autopilot. Let's perform a small experiment. Tomorrow morning, don't touch your phone. Not for 5 minutes. Just 5. Instead, sit in complete silence. Notice what happens. At first, nothing, then an urge. A tiny voice that whispers, "Just check the time." Maybe someone messaged you. It'll only take a second. That voice isn't random. It's a habit. And habits don't ask for permission. They ask for repetition. Before you know it, your hand reaches for the phone, almost by itself. One notification becomes 3. 3 becomes 10. One short video becomes another. Then another. 20 minutes disappear. Not because you chose to lose them, because you never consciously chose how to spend them. This is what modern drifting looks like. Not chains, not prisons, not dictators, just endless distractions, disguised as convenience. Here's something worth thinking about. For most of human history, the greatest battle was for survival, food, shelter, safety. Today, for millions of people, the greatest battle is for attention. Because wherever your attention goes, your life quietly follows. Every company wants it. Every advertisement competes for it. Every notification interrupts it. Every algorithm studies it. Your attention has become one of the most valuable resources on Earth. And the strange part, Most people give it away without noticing. Napoleon Hill wrote Outwitting the Devil decades before smartphones, before social media, before endless scrolling. Yet one of his most unsettling ideas feels even more relevant today. He believed that people who stop thinking for themselves become easy to control. Not through force, through distraction. Think about your average day. How many moments are truly your own? The moment you wake up, someone else's headline tells you what to worry about. Someone else's opinion tells you what to believe. Someone else's post tells you what success should look like. Someone else's highlight reel quietly convinces you your own life isn't enough. By lunchtime, your thoughts are already crowded with voices that weren't there when you woke up. And by evening, you're mentally exhausted. Not because you created something meaningful, because you've been consuming everyone else's priorities. That's the hidden tragedy. Drifting rarely feels empty. It feels busy. You answer emails, attend meetings, reply to messages, scroll through updates, watch another episode, read another headline, fill another calendar. The day feels productive. But ask yourself this: did you move closer to the person you want to become? Or did you simply react to everything demanding your attention? There's a difference, a profound difference. One creates a life, the other merely fills time. Imagine boarding a train. You never ask where it's going. Everyone else is getting on. So you do too. Hour after hour, the train keeps moving. The scenery changes. People get off. Others climb aboard. Years pass. Then one day, someone asks, "Why did you choose this destination?" And you realize, you never did. You only stayed on the train because everyone around you did. That's drifting, not choosing the wrong path, never stopping long enough to choose one at all. Here's what makes this even more dangerous. The human brain mistakes familiarity for safety. The longer you repeat a routine, the more natural it feels, even if it's slowly stealing your future. This is why people stay in careers they no longer love. Not because they are incapable of leaving, because staying has become familiar. It's why relationships survive long after they've stopped growing. It's why dreams slowly become memories. It's why people say, "This is just who I am," when the truth is, it's simply who they've practiced becoming. Every repeated action casts a vote. Every repeated excuse strengthens an identity. Every repeated distraction teaches your mind. This is what's important. The frightening part isn't that the world is full of distractions. The frightening part is that distractions don't simply consume your time. They quietly rewrite your priorities. And once your priorities change, your future changes with them. Because your future isn't built by the goals you set once a year. It's built by what repeatedly captures your attention every single day. So here's the question. When was the last time you sat alone, without music, without notifications, without another voice telling you what to think, and simply asked yourself, what do I actually want? Not what your parents wanted, not what society celebrates, not what algorithms reward, not what impresses strangers. What do you want? For many people, that silence feels uncomfortable, almost unbearable. Why? Because in silence, the current becomes visible. You begin noticing the dreams you've ignored, the conversations you've avoided, the promises you've broken to yourself, the life you've postponed. Perhaps that's why so many people fear silence more than noise. Because noise keeps us distracted. Silence forces us to pay attention. And attention is the beginning of awakening. But if drifting is so common, if nearly everyone is pulled toward comfort, routine, and distraction, then another question demands an answer. Why? Why would a mind capable of extraordinary creativity naturally choose the easiest path? The answer isn't weakness. It isn't laziness. It isn't a lack of ambition. The answer lies deep inside the human brain itself. Because long before the modern world existed, your mind was already designed to resist change. And once you understand why, you'll never judge yourself or anyone else the same way again. Next is why intelligent people drift: the brain's secret survival strategy. This chapter doesn't just criticize technology or busyness. It connects Napoleon Hill's concept of drifting to timeless aspects of human psychology: attention, habit, familiarity, and identity. Excellent. This is where the documentary changes from observation to understanding. The audience now knows what drifting is. Now we answer the deeper question: if drifting is so destructive, why does my brain keep choosing it? This is where modern psychology beautifully reinforces Napoleon Hill's ideas without claiming he anticipated contemporary neuroscience. Why intelligent people drift: the brain was designed to keep you safe, not extraordinary. If drifting is stealing millions of lives, then why doesn't the mind fight back? Why doesn't it scream, "Stop! You're wasting your potential. Wake up"? Instead, it does something far more surprising. It rewards drifting. That sounds impossible. But think about it. Imagine two doors standing in front of you. Behind the first door is certainty. You know exactly what will happen. No surprises. No embarrassment. No rejection. No risk. Behind the second door is uncertainty. Maybe you'll succeed. Maybe you'll fail. Maybe people will laugh. Maybe they'll admire you. You don't know. Which door does your brain naturally want you to choose? The first one. Almost every time. Not because your brain is trying to ruin your future. Because for most of human history, certainty meant survival. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors weren't worried about becoming successful entrepreneurs or writing best-selling books. They were trying to stay alive. A strange sound in the bushes could mean death. Leaving the safety of the tribe could mean death. Taking unnecessary risks could mean death. The brain learned one lesson exceptionally well. If something feels familiar, it's probably safe. That lesson helped humanity survive. But in the modern world, the same instinct often keeps people trapped. Your brain doesn't always distinguish between physical danger and psychological discomfort. To your nervous system, standing in front of a hungry predator and standing in front of an audience can produce surprisingly similar signals. Your heart races, your palms sweat, your breathing changes. Every instinct whispers, "Get out." Not because giving a presentation is life-threatening, because your ancient survival system doesn't like uncertainty. This is why courage feels unnatural. This is why starting something new feels exhausting. This is why changing your life often feels wrong. even when you know it's right. Your brain isn't asking, will this make my future better? It's asking, have we survived this before? If the answer is no, it becomes cautious, very cautious. Now think about what happens over time. Every time you avoid discomfort, your brain receives a message, good. We stayed safe. Every time you postpone, good. Nothing bad happened. Every time you choose the familiar, your mind quietly strengthens the habit. Without realizing it, you're training your own brain to fear growth. This is why intelligent people drift. Because intelligence doesn't override biology. In fact, sometimes intelligence makes drifting even easier. An intelligent mind can create brilliant excuses. I'm waiting for the perfect opportunity. I need one more course. I'm still researching. I'll begin when everything is ready. Notice something. Every excuse sounds responsible, logical, reasonable. That's why they're so dangerous. The mind rarely says, don't chase your dream. Instead it whispers, not yet. Two of the most powerful words in the English language, not yet. A week passes, then a month, then a year. Eventually, not yet becomes never. Napoleon Hill warned that drifting doesn't require people to quit. It only requires them to delay. Delay action. Delay courage. Delay change. Delay becoming the person they were capable of becoming. And here's the cruel irony. Every delay feels insignificant, almost invisible, until one day, you realize you've been postponing the same life for 10 years. Imagine planting a tree. Every morning, you tell yourself, I'll water it tomorrow. One missed day seems harmless. So does the second. Then the third. Weeks become months. Eventually the tree dies. Not because you hated it. Because neglect works quietly. Dreams die the same way. Relationships, health. Curiosity, purpose. Not through dramatic destruction. Through ordinary neglect. One tomorrow at a time. This is why drifting is so difficult to detect. Because nothing catastrophic happens today. The consequences arrive years later. By then, they feel like fate. People say, life just turned out this way. But life rarely just happens. It accumulates. Like drops of water filling a bucket. One decision. One habit. One excuse. One routine. Until eventually, the bucket overflows. And the future you've been building in silence becomes impossible to ignore. So if your brain naturally seeks comfort, does that mean you're trapped forever? Not at all. Because human beings possess something more powerful than instinct. Awareness. The moment you become conscious of the current, you gain the ability to step out of it. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But intentionally. And that's where drifting begins to lose its power. Not because fear disappears, but because awareness finally becomes louder than habit. But there's one force even stronger than fear. One force that quietly reinforces every distraction, every delay, and every excuse. It's so ordinary. Most people never question it. Yet Napoleon Hill believed it was one of the greatest allies of drifting. It's called comfort. And what if the thing you've spent your entire life chasing is the very thing preventing you from becoming who you're capable of being? Now shift from self-blame to self-understanding. Instead of saying, you're lazy, It explains that the brain evolved to favor familiarity and safety. This makes you more receptive to change because you feel understood rather than judged. Now you understand what drifting is, why it happens, why the brain chooses it. Now we reveal the biggest illusion. Great. This is where the documentary becomes deeply emotional. Up to now, the viewer understands what drifting is, why it happens, why the brain chooses it. Now we reveal the biggest illusion. This act should make you question something they've been taught their entire lives. The comfort trap, the addiction nobody calls an addiction. There is a strange paradox hidden inside almost every human life. The very thing we spend years chasing can quietly become the thing that destroys us. Comfort. Think about that word for a moment. Comfort sounds harmless. Comfort sounds earned. Comfort sounds like success. After all, isn't that what we're told to pursue? A comfortable home, a comfortable salary, a comfortable routine, a comfortable life. There's nothing wrong with comfort itself. The danger begins when comfort stops becoming a place to rest and becomes the place you refuse to leave. Imagine climbing a mountain. Halfway to the summit, you find a small cabin. Inside, there's warmth, food, a soft chair, a fire quietly burning. Outside, the climb grows steeper. The air becomes colder. The path becomes uncertain. Most people tell themselves, "I'll stay here just one more night." Tomorrow, they'll continue. Tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next year. Eventually, the cabin no longer feels like a stop along the journey. It becomes home. The mountain remains unconquered, not because it was impossible to climb, because comfort quietly convinced them they had already gone far enough. That is the psychology of drifting. It doesn't ask you to quit. It simply offers you a comfortable place to stop growing. Napoleon Hill understood something that still unsettles psychologists today. Human beings don't become trapped because they love suffering. They become trapped because they become attached to familiarity. And familiarity often disguises itself as safety. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to leave a job you no longer enjoy? Not because you love it, because it's familiar. You know the people. You know the routine. You know exactly what tomorrow looks like. The unknown feels heavier than the dissatisfaction. So you stay, not because you're happy, because certainty feels less frightening than possibility. The same thing happens in relationships. People remain where they're no longer growing. Not always because they want to, but because starting over feels terrifying. Comfort whispers, "At least you know what to expect." Dreams fade the same way. Not through failure, through comfort. The book you never write, the business you never begin, the conversation you never have, the city you never move to, the opportunity you never take. None of these disappear overnight. They simply wait. While comfort convinces you there will always be another chance. But there is another layer to this story, and it's one few people ever notice. Comfort doesn't only protect you from pain. It protects you from discovering who you might become. Imagine if every butterfly decided to stay inside its cocoon, safe, protected, warm. Nothing dangerous could reach it, but nothing extraordinary could emerge either. Growth has always demanded discomfort. Every meaningful transformation begins with uncertainty. A child learning to walk an athlete pushing beyond exhaustion, an artist staring at a blank canvas, an entrepreneur risking failure. None of those moments feel comfortable, but every remarkable life contains thousands of uncomfortable moments that someone chose not to avoid. Now compare that to modern life. Whenever boredom appears, we scroll. Whenever loneliness appears, we distract ourselves. Whenever anxiety appears, we escape into entertainment. We've become remarkably skilled at avoiding discomfort. And that's precisely why so many people feel stuck. Because discomfort isn't always your enemy. Sometimes, it's your invitation. The discomfort before speaking your truth. The discomfort before changing careers. The discomfort before ending what no longer serves you. The discomfort before becoming someone new. Here's something worth remembering. Your comfort zone isn't a prison because it's painful. It's a prison because it's pleasant. Prisons built from suffering are easy to escape. Prisons built from pleasure are much harder to leave. That's why drifting feels so effortless. Nothing appears to be wrong. Your bills are paid. Your routine works. People think you're doing fine. Even you begin believing it. Until one quiet evening, a question appears. Is this really the life I wanted? It's a dangerous question. Because once you hear it, it's difficult to silence again. Many people spend years trying, buying more things, working longer hours, keeping themselves endlessly busy. Not because busyness creates meaning, because busyness drowns out reflection. Silence becomes uncomfortable, not because silence is empty, because silence reveals everything we've been avoiding. Napoleon Hill believed drifting thrives in minds that never stop long enough to question themselves. Not because they are unintelligent, because they are distracted. Constant movement creates the illusion of progress. But motion isn't the same as direction. A rocking chair moves all day. It never leaves the porch. Read that again. A rocking chair moves all day, yet it never gets anywhere. How many lives look exactly like that? Busy, exhausted, always moving, yet quietly standing in the same place, year after year. This is the hidden cost of comfort. It doesn't steal your future in dramatic ways. It asks for tiny compromises. Just this once. Just one more delay. Just one more excuse. Just one more year. Until one day, your future arrives, looking exactly like your past. And perhaps that's the greatest tragedy of all. Not that people fail, but that they become so comfortable with who they are. They never discover who they could have been. But if comfort is the prison, then what locks the door? What keeps intelligent people defending lives they secretly wish they could change? The answer isn't outside of you. It's a voice, one you've heard thousands of times. A voice so familiar, you mistake it for your own. In the next chapter, we'll uncover the hidden stories that quietly shape your identity, and why the most powerful prison isn't built from walls, but from the words you keep repeating to yourself. Shifts the conversation from external distractions to the internal attachment to comfort, making you viewers confront a deeper question. Have I mistaken comfort for fulfillment? It also introduces a memorable metaphor, the rocking chair, that can become one of the documentary's most quotable and visually powerful moments. This is the chapter that transforms the documentary from motivational into psychological. If the last chapter exposed the prison, next chapter reveals the prison guard, not fear. Not failure, identity. This is where the viewer realizes they've been arguing with themselves for years. And losing. The stories that built your prison, the voice you mistook for yourself. Imagine meeting someone who follows you everywhere, from the day you're born until the day you die. They comment on everything you do, every mistake, every success, every dream, every fear. They never leave. Eventually, you stop noticing they are there. Now here's the unsettling part. That person isn't someone else. It's the voice inside your own mind. Most people believe that voice tells the truth. But what if it doesn't? What if it simply repeats whatever you've taught it to believe? Think back to childhood. Long before you chose your own beliefs, someone else was choosing them for you. Parents, teachers, friends, television, culture. Every sentence became another brick. Be realistic. People like us don't do that. Don't embarrass yourself. Play it safe. Money is hard to earn. Dreams don't pay the bills. At first, they were only words. Then they became opinions. Eventually, they became identity. Years later, you introduce yourself to the world, using someone else's sentences. I'm not creative. I'm terrible with money. I'm shy. I'm just unlucky. I've never been a leader. Listen carefully. Those aren't facts. They are stories. Stories repeated so many times. Your brain stopped questioning them. Napoleon Hill believed this was one of the devil's greatest victories. Not making people believe lies. Making people repeat those lies until they became their own truth. Psychologists understand something fascinating. Your brain doesn't only listen to your thoughts. It learns from them. Imagine hearing someone tell a child, "You're useless," every single day. Eventually, the child begins believing it. Now imagine the child grows up and continues saying those same words to themselves. The bully disappeared years ago, but the voice remained. That's the tragedy. Many people escape difficult childhoods, yet carry the prison inside them forever. Not because the past controls them, because the story does. Your identity isn't built in one dramatic moment. It's built through repetition. Every time you say, "I always fail," your brain quietly asks if that's who we are. How should we behave? Every time you say, "I'm not confident," your actions begin searching for evidence. Not because the statement is true, because the brain loves consistency. It wants your behavior to match your identity. That's why changing your life feels so difficult. You're not just changing habits. You're challenging a story you've been telling yourself for years. Imagine an actor. Every day, they wear the same costume, speak the same lines, play the same character. Eventually, people stop seeing the actor. They only see the role. Now imagine forgetting. You're acting. That's what identity can become. A role repeated so often. You mistake it for who you are. The shy person, the anxious person, the victim, the perfectionist, the procrastinator, the one who's always too late. Each label becomes another invisible chain. Not because labels have power, because belief does. Here's a question that might change your life. Who would you be if you stopped introducing yourself through your old wounds? Not your achievements, not your failures, not your fears. Who are you? Without the story. Take a moment. Close your eyes if you need to. Imagine your inner voice falling completely silent. No criticism. No excuses. No old labels. Just awareness. Who remains? Most people never ask that question. Because silence is frightening. Without the story, there's uncertainty. But there's also freedom. Think about the people who transformed history. They all had something in common. At some point, they stopped believing the version of themselves that everyone else accepted. The inventor who refused to believe failure defined them. The artist who refused to believe criticism determined their worth. The entrepreneur who refused to believe success belonged only to other people. The difference wasn't talent. It was the courage to rewrite the story. Napoleon Hill wasn't suggesting positive thinking alone changes reality. He was pointing towards something much deeper. Every action you take either strengthens the old story or begins writing a new one. Imagine your identity as a book. Every decision writes another sentence. Every habit, another paragraph. Every courageous act, another chapter. The remarkable thing about books is that they can always continue. The next page has never been written. Not by your parents, not by your past, not by society, only by the choices you make today. So ask yourself, what story have you been rehearsing without realizing it? Is it a story of limitation or possibility? Because drifting doesn't begin when you stop moving. It begins when you stop believing you can become someone different. And the moment you question that belief, the prison begins to crack. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough for light to finally get in. But questioning the story isn't enough. Awareness opens the prison door. Yet many people still refuse to walk through it. Why? Because seeing the truth and acting on it are two very different things. In the next chapter, we'll uncover the hidden psychology of courage. Not the kind you see in movies. The quiet courage that changes ordinary lives. One decision at a time. This chapter shifts the focus inward. Rather than blaming society, fear, or distraction, it shows you viewers that the most enduring prison is often the story they tell themselves. By ending with the image of identity as an unfinished book. This is where most motivational videos fail. They tell people to take action. We're not going to do that. We're going to explain the psychology of courage in a way that changes how people think about action itself. This is where you should feel, I don't need more motivation. I need one decision. The first step that changes everything. Why courage always comes second. There is one of the biggest lies ever told about success. It's so common. Most people never question it. The lie sounds like this. One day, I'll feel ready. Ready to change careers. Ready to start the business. Ready to write the book. Ready to leave the relationship. Ready to speak up. Ready to finally begin. But what if ready isn't a feeling? What if it's the reward for something else? Think back to the first time you learned to ride a bicycle. Were you confident? Of course not. You were terrified. Your hands shook. Your balance disappeared. You probably fell. Maybe more than once. Yet something remarkable happened. Not before you started, after. With every attempt, your confidence grew, not because someone gave it to you, because action taught your brain. We've survived this before. Confidence wasn't the starting line. It was the finish line of repeated courage. That's what so many people misunderstand. They wait for confidence before taking action. But confidence has always been the result of action, never the requirement. Napoleon Hill understood something extraordinary. The people who escaped drifting were not fearless. They simply refused to let fear become the driver. Imagine you're standing at the edge of a dense forest. Behind you is the life you've always known, safe, predictable, comfortable. Ahead of you, there is only fog. You cannot see the destination. You cannot see the path. You cannot even see the next 100 steps. Only the first one. Most people remain where they are. Not because the forest is dangerous, because they demand certainty before movement. But certainty has never lived. At the beginning of a meaningful journey, it appears only after you've walked far enough to look back. That is why drifting feels easier than growth. Drifting requires no decision. Growth requires one, just one. And that single decision has the power to interrupt years of unconscious living. History is filled with people who looked extraordinary. But when you examine their lives closely, their greatest achievements rarely began with extraordinary moments. They began with ordinary decisions. One author opening a blank page. One entrepreneur making a difficult phone call. One student choosing to study while others slept. One person deciding they would no longer accept the story they'd been living. The decision looked small. The consequences became enormous. This is how lives change. Not through dramatic breakthroughs, through repeated moments where someone chooses intention over impulse, awareness over autopilot, purpose over comfort. Imagine a ship crossing the ocean. If the captain adjusts the compass by just 1 degree, nothing appears different. The passengers notice nothing. The sea looks the same. The sky looks the same. The ship still moves forward. But weeks later, that single degree has carried the ship to an entirely different continent. Your life works exactly the same way. One conversation, one habit, one decision, repeated consistently, can redirect decades. That is why drifting is so dangerous, and why awareness is so powerful. Because both begin with small choices. Never underestimate a single decision. Every meaningful transformation in history began with one person deciding no more. No more excuses. No more waiting. No more pretending. No more drifting. The world celebrates dramatic success, but it almost never sees the quiet decision that made everything else possible. Here's another truth. You don't have to solve your entire future today. You don't need to know every answer. You don't need to eliminate every fear. You only need enough courage for the next step. That's all. One honest conversation. One application. One chapter. One workout. One apology. One beginning. Because the future isn't built by giant leaps. It's built by ordinary decisions, made consistently, long after motivation disappears. And perhaps That's the greatest misunderstanding of all. Motivation fades. Discipline grows. Habits compound. Identity evolves. But it all begins with one choice. The choice to stop drifting. So now, we've uncovered the current. We've exposed the comfort that keeps us still. We've questioned the stories that built our identity. And we've discovered that courage isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. But before this journey ends, there is one final truth. One question that may stay with you long after this video is over. Because the greatest cost of drifting isn't what it takes from your present. It's what it quietly steals from your future. Why this chapter is different. Most motivational content says, take action. This chapter explains why action changes the brain. It reframes courage as something that emerges through repeated behavior, rather than something you must possess before you begin. The ship and compass metaphor reinforces the documentary's central message. Lives are redirected by small, intentional choices, not dramatic leaps. The moment you wake up, so where does that leave us? Perhaps the most frightening thing about drifting isn't that it happens. It's that it feels completely normal. No alarms. No warning signs. No dramatic collapse. Just ordinary days. Repeated so many times, they quietly become your life. And maybe that's the greatest lesson hidden inside Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. The devil doesn't conquer people with fear alone. He conquers them with unconsciousness, with routines that are never questioned, with excuses that sound reasonable, with comfort that slowly replaces purpose, with stories repeated until they become identity. Because a person who never questions the direction of their life will almost always end up wherever the current decides to take them. But here's the beautiful truth. The moment you become aware of the current, it begins to lose its power. Awareness doesn't change your life overnight, but it changes the next decision. And sometimes, one decision is enough to change an entire future. Remember the river we stood beside at the beginning of this journey. For most of this documentary, the current carried us downstream, quietly, patiently, almost invisibly. But rivers don't control people. Unconsciousness does. The moment you plant your feet, the current is no longer in charge, you are. Maybe your life doesn't need a complete restart. Maybe it doesn't need a miracle. Maybe it simply needs one conscious decision, made today, instead of tomorrow, because tomorrow has stolen enough lives already. The future you've been waiting for has always been built by the choices you make when no one is watching. So before this video ends, ask yourself one final question. Am I living by design or by default? Because the answer to that question may determine the rest of your life. This documentary was inspired by the timeless ideas in Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill, a book that challenges us to question fear, habit, comfort, and the invisible psychological forces that quietly shape our destiny. But this is only the beginning, because drifting is only one piece of a much larger puzzle. Next episode, the hidden psychology of fear. Why fear sounds like your own voice. What if the voice inside your head isn't always telling you the truth? What if the thoughts you've trusted for years, you're not ready, you're not good enough, wait a little longer, were never your own? What if fear never arrives shouting, but whispering so quietly that you mistake it for wisdom? In our next documentary, we'll uncover one of the most disturbing ideas inspired by Outwitting the Devil. Not that fear exists, but that it has learned to speak in your own voice. And once you hear the difference, you may never trust every thought you think again. If this documentary challenged the way you think, then you're exactly where you belong. Welcome to Dark Mind Pro. This isn't a channel about quick motivation or empty inspiration. It's a place where we explore the hidden psychology behind fear, identity, influence, habits, power, and the invisible forces that quietly shape every human life. Every documentary is designed to make you question what most people accept without thinking, to help you see what others overlook, and to give you the awareness to take back control of your own mind. So if you're ready to stop drifting, to think more deeply, and to uncover the psychology hidden beneath everyday life, subscribe to Dark Mind Pro and join us on this journey. Because the greatest prison was never built with walls. It was built inside the mind. And together, we're going to learn how to escape it. Until the next documentary, stay curious, stay aware, and never stop questioning the stories that shape your life.